This week's social story, that's where we post 3 stories on our social media and let you pick one for us to take a deeper dive into. Now, this week's choices: SCOTUS and SNAP benefits, chain restaurants struggling, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And with 64% of the vote, you chose for us to cover what's happening with SNAP benefits. Now, amid the ongoing legal battle playing out between the Trump administration and 25 states, that includes Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's decision to temporarily pause a lower court's ruling requiring the Trump administration to fully fund SNAP benefits. Joining me for more, ABC's Christiane Cordero. Christiane, give us the latest on the Trump administration ordering individual states to stop stepping in to provide SNAP benefits during the shutdown.
So they ordered individual states to do so in rhetoric and through a letter that was technically filed to a federal appeals court saying that states are not authorized to issue SNAP benefits, even threatening to fine the states that already have. And there are 9, by the way, that already have. This comes, as you mentioned, as the administration faces its own separate legal battle over how quickly it can get SNAP benefits out. So some states have decided to step in the meantime. And the administration originally said that it wouldn't reimburse states that use state funding, but now the federal government is appearing to take it a step further in threatening to fine states that do or already have in some cases. Ike.
So what does this mean for the states that already issued the full SNAP benefits? I know you said that they were talking about possibly fining them, but is there any recourse if that money actually is doled out?
Yeah, we'll have to see how the court weighs in first. I mean, certainly the threat of a fine could bring some states to a pause, the 41 or so that haven't taken any action yet. But as I mentioned, 9 have, and that includes Kansas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Vermont, and New Jersey that have already issued the full benefits. And then states that said that they are issuing full benefits and are in the middle of processing it include Connecticut, New York, Minnesota, North Carolina, and South Dakota. So you can kind of get a picture of the wide swath of the country that has started to issue these kinds of reimbursements. And so that means that families have received payments in many of these states, and in many cases, they likely have spent some of that, so it could get a little messy.
Christiane, we're talking about 42 million Americans, okay? 42 million Americans who rely on these SNAP benefits. But who will actually be affected the most?
It's staggering to think of the fact that 12% of the population relies on food assistance in this way. And when you really zoom in and get a sense of the vulnerable communities within a vulnerable community, it's kids and seniors by and large. The American Academy of Pediatrics recently reported 1 in 7 kids are still going hungry despite being on SNAP benefits. Our Selena Wang spoke with a mom in Connecticut who's raising a 4-year-old son with autism and a 12-year-old stepdaughter. She says that she had 23 cents in her account to feed her family when the SNAP payment finally came through. That was during the standoff when it hadn't yet. And she, in the meantime, had been stretching with what little she had, doing things like skipping meals, those heartbreaking stories that we've heard from across the country. So now her payment did come through to the tune of $534, but she doesn't know if it'll last, and much of this does hang in the courts.
All right, Christiane Cordero, thank you for that update. Now let's bring in ABC News legal contributor Kim Wehle for more on the legal battle with SNAP. Kim, thank you for joining me. Let's start with Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's decision to pause SNAP payments. Many people are confused about her decision because she is a well-known critic of the Trump administration. So some say it appears to side with the president. What does her decision actually do?
So the lower court judge, the trial court judge, sided with the SNAP payments, said Donald Trump's administration had violated the law, didn't have any justification for doing this. That went up to the appellate court, the First Circuit. The First Circuit agreed with the lower court judge. You got to pay this money out. Then it went to the Supreme Court on an emergency state petition. We've seen many of these, Ike. I think the court has granted over 20 for Donald Trump. Every justice gets a certain part of the country to actually entertain these particular petitions. Justice Jackson happens to be the one for this part of the country. And she basically stayed those lower court rulings pending the First Circuit's decision on the merits. That is, that lower court, the intermediate court's going to say, listen, did Donald Trump actually properly withhold this money, or must he pay it? And I think the reason she probably did this is because if she had sided with the SNAP payments, the majority on the court had the opportunity to go ahead and stay it anyway. That is, she probably knew, I think the guess would be that her colleagues, the conservative majority, would probably do it anyway. This way, she actually instructed the Intermediate Appellate Court to act very quickly. She also said once she set a timeline for how long the stay would last. So I think her probably knowing, listen, this was inevitable, and she has a little more control in the instructions to the lower courts. It's not exactly, it's not a win for the SNAP beneficiaries by any means, but she probably just knew how it was going to come out with her colleagues, given time and time again, how they side with Donald Trump.
Now, what do you make of the Trump administration's appeal, and what do you expect to actually happen next?
Well, I did take a look at the lower court judge's opinion, and it's very weak for Donald Trump. That is, this money, he's saying it should be frozen, but there is an emergency fund that Congress has created. And the lower federal court judge said, listen, this is all politics. As a matter of, the facts on the ground, you have the money. But again, this majority has sided with Donald Trump, even when the Constitution says otherwise, even when we're talking about the Due Process Clause or the Fourth Amendment or the Appropriations Clause. So he very well could have a win in the Supreme Court, and the justices on the majority might just say, listen, this is up to Congress to fix. This is about the shutdown. It's about politics. We're going to side with the president once again. I think that's not unlikely given the trajectory of this court. So it will come down, in my estimation, at the end of the day, probably to politics, not so much to the Supreme Court.
All right, ABC News legal.
But we don't know for sure. Yeah.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. ABC News legal contributor Kim Wehle, thank you so much for your analysis.